The energy inside the Los Angeles International Martial Arts Expo was unlike anything the crowd had felt before. Thousands of fans from around the world packed the massive convention hall, where legends, grandmasters, and modern stars all gathered under one roof. Cameras flashed, gloves were signed, and the air carried the familiar mix of excitement, sweat, and adrenaline. But that year, something felt different. Two names were echoing through the venue louder than any others. Robert Wall, the old-school karate powerhouse known for his iron will, and Steven Seagal, the aikido master whose fluid, effortless movements had mesmerized fans for decades. Both were scheduled to appear, but no one expected them to cross paths, let alone interact. Still, whispers spread like wildfire. Did you hear? Wall is warming up in the demo area. Seagal is doing a seminar on joint locks in an hour. What if they meet? Imagine that. Fans joked, laughed, speculated, but underneath the humor, a spark of curiosity grew. After all, the martial arts world had always debated these two men. Karate power versus aikido precision. Raw strength versus effortless technique. Old guard versus the Hollywood icon. Near the center of the expo, a large open mat area was surrounded by spectators watching ongoing demonstrations. Robert Wall stood among them, casually observing a group of young practitioners. He wore a crisp GI, his posture straight, his presence commanding. Age had only added to his aura, a warrior who didn't need to prove anything. Across the hall, Steven Seagal walked with his usual calm swagger, dressed in his signature black uniform, his steps slow and deliberate. People made space for him without being asked. His reputation alone created a silent gravity that pulled eyes his way. And then it happened. From opposite ends of the expo, the two men's paths aligned, slowly, almost theatrically, as they headed toward the same demonstration area. People noticed immediately. Wait, are they both coming here? No way. This can't be real. Dude, record this. The crowd shifted, forming a loose circle around the mat. Phones lifted. Voices hushed. Cameras zoomed in. Two martial arts titans were now walking straight toward each other. And nobody knew what would happen next. But everyone felt it. Something unforgettable was about to take place. As Steven Seagal approached the demonstration mat, the atmosphere thickened. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation, the electric kind that crawls across your skin before something big happens. Robert Wall stood with his arms crossed, watching a group finish their kata routine. He hadn't noticed Seagal yet, but the crowd definitely had. Murmurs swept through the ring of spectators like a sudden gust of wind. Bro, Seagal's coming right towards him. This is actually happening. No way this is just a coincidence. Seagal stepped onto the edge of the mat with his characteristic calm confidence. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't showing off. He simply moved with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he could do. One of the expo organizers nervously approached Wall. Sir. Seagal is here for a brief demo. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. Wall gave a polite nod. Why wouldn't I? Just then, Seagal lifted his eyes and met Wall's across the mat. The crowd inhaled sharply. For a moment, nothing happened. No words. No gestures. Just two legends sizing each other up with the subtle, silent intensity only true martial artists understand. Then, an unexpected spark ignited the moment. A young student demonstrating an aikido wrist lock misstepped and stumbled backward, almost slamming into Robert Wall. Wall instinctively caught the boy before he fell. Seagal raised an eyebrow. Wall offered a brief smile. The boy stammered an apology, but a few fans misinterpreted the moment entirely. Oh, Wall just intercepted an aikido move. Seagal didn't like that look. Did Wall do that on purpose? Rumors erupted in real time. Someone shouted, "Let them spar." Just a friendly one. The expo staff tried to calm things down, but the crowd had already taken control. Phones lifted higher. People leaned in. Even those at the far ends of the hall rushed toward the commotion. The tension wasn't hostile, but it was undeniably real. Two masters, two styles, two reputations, and fate had placed them on the same mat. The circle around the mat had doubled in size within minutes. People were squeezing between columns, standing on benches, even holding phones above their heads just to get a glimpse. The expo staff tried to maintain order, but the energy had already slipped out of anyone's control. This wasn't just a demonstration anymore. This was a moment the martial arts world never expected to see in real life. Robert Wall adjusted the sleeves of his GI, scanning the growing crowd before his eyes returned to Steven Seagal. Seagal stood still, hands folded calmly in front of him, wearing that unreadable half-serious, half-amused expression he was known for. It was the look of a man who could either break your wrist or offer you tea, depending on how you approached him. A hush spread as Seagal's voice finally cut through the tension. "You have good reflexes, Robert," he said, referring to the moment Wall caught the young student. "Still quick after all these years." Wall chuckled. "Reflexes don't age. Only knees do." The crowd laughed nervously, grateful that the two giants were at least speaking with respect. But that didn't reduce the tension. In fact, it heightened it, because now everyone sensed the same thing. A demonstration between these two wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Seagal gestured toward the mat. "Why don't we give these folks a quick example of controlled technique? Something light, nothing too dramatic." Wall raised an eyebrow. "Controlled, huh? You're kind of controlled, or mine?" Seagal smirked. "Let's find out." The crowd exploded with excitement. Fans surged closer, almost breaking the perimeter. Even some well-known martial artists present at the expo joined the ring, whispering among themselves. "Dude, this is insane. Two legends on the same mat. I thought this was just an expo. If someone doesn't record this, I'm suing." An announcer tried to step in. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. This is not an official." But his voice was drowned out by cheering. Wall stepped onto the center of the mat first. His bare feet pressed against the smooth surface with the confidence of a man who had fought real fighters, in real dojos, under real pressure. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, the eyes of a lifelong martial artist who had nothing to prove, yet always welcome to test. Seagal entered the mat with slow, deliberate movements. His steps were soft, his posture loose but balanced. His aikido training made him look weightless, like someone whose center of gravity didn't exist in the way normal bodies did. Two styles, two philosophies, two worlds, meeting on one mat. Seagal placed his hands loosely at chest level. "Shall we begin with something simple?" Wall nodded. "Lead the way." They approached each other slowly, not as enemies, but as martial artists exploring each other's timing. Wall moved with small, calculated steps, testing distance. Seagal floated forward, hands ready to redirect movement. The first contact came softly. Seagal reached out to place his palm on Wall's wrist, demonstrating a common aikido entry. Wall countered by shifting his hip, creating a solid base that made his arm unmovable. The crowd gasped. "Oh damn, Wall isn't budging. Bro, this is getting real." Seagal smiled slightly, as if appreciating the resistance. Without warning, he changed angles, a smooth, circular movement designed to unbalance an opponent. Wall reacted instantly, pivoting with the motion and using his karate footwork to stay grounded. Two moves, two counters, nothing flashy, but the martial artists watching knew exactly how high level it was. Seagal lifted a finger. Strong foundation. Wall responded, fluid hands. Then the moment shifted. A young fan shouted, "Come on, let's see a real one." The crowd roared. A dangerous excitement filled the air. And in that energy, both men instinctively raised the intensity. Just a notch, but enough to ignite sparks. Seagal moved first this time, stepping in with a flowing wrist capture. Wall blocked with a sharp downward motion. Seagal turned the block into a redirection, aiming to guide Wall off balance. Wall planted his heel and countered with a measured push, not a strike, but a firm statement. Karate wasn't going to be swept aside. Seagal's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in deep focus. The kind of focus that comes right before a serious demonstration. The crowd held its breath. A silence fell inside the hall, heavy as stone. Everyone, from the front row to the furthest corner, felt the same thing. This was no longer a simple demo. This was two legends testing each other, feeling each other's technique, searching for a crack, a weakness, a moment. Two masters, one mat, and a crowd waiting for the spark that would turn this controlled exchange into an unforgettable encounter. And that spark was only a heartbeat away. As the 1990s rolled forward, stories about Steven Seagal's behavior on set had become Hollywood folklore, some exaggerated, some disputed, but many surprisingly consistent. On the other hand was Robert Wall, a man respected not just for his martial knowledge, but for his discipline, restraint, and loyalty to the martial arts community. So when whispers began circulating that Seagal had made a few bold claims about being immune to certain techniques, and that he could take down anyone, anytime, it didn't take long for Wall to hear about it. But contrary to the dramatized versions that float around the internet, Robert Wall didn't storm onto a set looking for confrontation. He didn't challenge Seagal in front of hundreds of people. The truth is actually more interesting and more revealing. According to people who were around both men, Wall heard from close friends that Seagal had allegedly dismissed the fighting abilities of traditional karate practitioners, referring to some as rigid or no threat. And when Seagal supposedly added that even high-level black belts couldn't handle him, Wall didn't get offended. He got curious. He had been around Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, Bill Wallace, real fighters, real champions, and he had personally witnessed how even legends approached combat with humility. So when he heard that Seagal was making sweeping claims about his unbeatable skill, Wall didn't immediately judge him. He wanted to understand the man better. That curiosity led to one of the most talked about off-camera meetings in martial arts circles. Wall arranged to visit Seagal privately, not to fight, but to talk. Several martial artists who knew both men described Wall as calm, direct, and respectful during the interaction. There was no tension in his presence, no chest thumping. Wall simply wanted to ask Seagal about the statements attributed to him. He believed misunderstandings often come from secondhand stories, and he was willing to give Seagal the benefit of the doubt. Seagal welcomed him. The early part of their conversation was cordial. They talked about aikido, the film industry, how choreographed fight scenes differ from real combat, and the growing popularity of martial arts in the West. But eventually, the conversation turned toward the reason Wall had come, the claim Seagal was said to have made. Wall asked him, straight up, whether he had really said he could defeat any karate fighter, or that he was immune to being choked or locked by other martial artists. Those who later heard about the meeting described Seagal's reaction as evasive. Instead of giving a clear yes or no, Seagal shifted into a more philosophical mode, talking about energy, awareness, and the limitations of traditional sparring. Wall listened patiently, but he knew when someone was sidestepping a point. Then came the moment that has been retold in countless variations. Wall offered Seagal the chance to demonstrate. Not a challenge, not a fight. A demonstration, controlled, respectful, technical. Wall reportedly said something along the lines of, "If you believe you can't be choked, show me. I'll apply the hold carefully." Seagal declined. Those present said he gave multiple reasons. His back wasn't in great shape, he wasn't dressed for physical training, and demonstrations like that weren't necessary because his aikido spoke for itself. Wall didn't push. He didn't mock him. He simply accepted Seagal's refusal with the same calmness he walked in with. But the refusal left an impression. Wall had grown up around martial artists who tested each other constantly. Bruce Lee tested everything. Chuck Norris tested everything. Joe Louis tested everything. They weren't ashamed of failing a technique or getting caught in a hold. They viewed it as part of growth. So when Seagal insisted he could not be locked or taken down, but refused to allow anyone to test it, the claim contradicted the culture Wall respected. After the meeting, Wall never publicly insulted Seagal. He never exaggerated the story to make himself look superior. Instead, he simply stated that Seagal made very strong claims, but wasn't willing to back them physically. That was as far as Wall would go, because he wasn't interested in humiliating anyone or starting a feud. But Hollywood wasn't so restrained. Word spread among stunt coordinators, fight choreographers, and martial artists connected to the film industry. As stories traveled from person to person, the tale grew larger than the actual event. Some versions claimed Wall challenged Seagal to a real fight. Others said Seagal ran away. Others said Wall warned Seagal never to disrespect traditional fighters again. None of that happened. What actually happened is more grounded and more telling. A respected martial artist confronted another martial artist about bold claims, offered an opportunity for demonstration, and received a polite refusal. The aftermath didn't create animosity, but it did shape reputations. Wall remained what he had always been: honest, skilled, and respected. Seagal, on the other hand, gained a reputation for being someone who talked bigger than he was willing to test. And in martial arts, humility is often worth more than strength. In the martial arts world, stories have a life of their own. Some fade quickly, forgotten after a few retellings. Others evolve, grow, and become legends, told in dojos, film sets, and locker rooms across decades. The story of Robert Wall and Steven Seagal became one of those stories, not because of drama, but because of what it revealed about character, credibility, and the widening gap between Hollywood martial arts and real-world practitioners. After Wall's quiet meeting with Seagal, he returned to his training routine and his film commitments as if nothing unusual had happened. That was Robert Wall's way. He was never someone who chased attention or conflict. He believed a martial artist should be measured by what he does, not what he says. And in Wall's circles, Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, Bill Wallace, your skill was proven on the mat, not in interviews. But the world around them was changing. Hollywood's influence on martial arts was reaching new heights. Action stars were becoming global icons, and the lines between real skill and screen skill were blurring. Seagal was, without question, a major part of that shift. His aikido-based fighting style was unlike anything Western audiences had seen. He moved differently from other action heroes, smooth, fluid, almost effortless. On camera, his throws and joint locks looked devastating and elegant. People believed what they saw, and that's where the conflict truly began, not between Wall and Seagal, but between expectation and reality. Behind the scenes, many stunt performers found themselves at the receiving end of Seagal's demonstrations. Some said he applied techniques too hard, using real pain as part of his choreography. Others felt he didn't respect the difference between a cooperative stunt partner and an actual opponent. In martial arts, respect was the foundation. In filmmaking, pressure and ego often interfered. Robert Wall watched this with a mix of concern and understanding. He had been in movies long enough to know that actors sometimes exaggerated their abilities. But what bothered him, and many seasoned martial artists, was when exaggeration became identity. When Seagal began giving interviews claiming he could defeat any opponent alive. When he suggested he was immune to certain techniques. When he downplayed the abilities of other martial artists. That's when Wall's perspective shifted from curiosity to quiet disappointment. Still, Wall never publicly attacked Seagal. He didn't need to. Other Hollywood veterans, martial arts champions, and stunt professionals filled that space. Among the most vocal critics was Gene LaBelle, one of the toughest grapplers in American history, known for having wrestled bears and sparred with everyone from Bruce Lee to world-class judokas. When rumors spread that LaBelle had left Seagal unconscious after applying a choke during an on-set disagreement, the martial arts community erupted. Seagal denied it. LaBelle refused to brag about it. Wall stayed silent. observing how the story grew larger than life. These stories, true or not, had something in common. They painted Seagal as someone who overestimated his abilities and underestimated others. And people noticed. The martial arts world isn't easily fooled. You can make a stunt look powerful, but a trained eye can see whether you're controlling your opponent or if your opponent is cooperating. Wall knew that. His peers knew that. That's why Seagal's reputation began to shift, from mysterious aikido master to Hollywood martial artist with a questionable relationship to realistic combat. But perhaps the most surprising thing was how gentle Wall remained when speaking about Seagal. When interviewers tried to bait him into the drama, Wall refused to take the easy path. He didn't mock Seagal. He didn't call him a fraud. Instead, he often said something like, "Steven has his style, and every style has value." But claiming to be unbeatable helps no one. Wall's restraint made his quiet criticisms heavier than any insult could have been. He wasn't trying to win anything. He was defending martial arts values that had guided him for decades: humility, respect, and honesty about one's limitations. Meanwhile, Hollywood continued pushing Seagal as an invincible force. The more his films portrayed him as unbeatable, the more his real-life claims seemed to merge with his screen persona. It was no longer clear where Steven Seagal the actor ended and Steven Seagal the martial arts master began. This confusion made the martial arts community uneasy. Because if an actor convinces the world he is undefeatable, what does that say to young students who think technique alone makes them invincible? What message does it send about the importance of sparring, drilling, humility, and acknowledging that even the greatest fighters can be caught? Wall understood this danger deeply. That's why his meeting with Seagal mattered, not because punches were thrown, but because it symbolized the divide between two philosophies. The old-school martial artist, forged in discipline, humility, and constant testing, and the Hollywood martial artist, shaped by image, choreography, and public perception. Wall had no interest in humiliating Seagal. He simply wanted reality to remain grounded. His message, though never spoken loudly, was clear. If you make a claim, be willing to prove it. If you cannot prove it, do not make the claim. This principle, simple yet timeless, became the backbone of the entire story. But the world didn't see that quiet meeting. It only saw the legend. And legends, once born, rarely stay small. As months passed, the whispers surrounding Steven Seagal grew louder. Hollywood stuntmen swapped stories and trailers. Fighters discussed him in locker rooms. Even fans debated endlessly online. Some defended him fiercely, insisting his aikido was unmatched. Others believed the legends of him refusing to spar, avoiding pressure situations, and dismissing other martial artists. But the martial arts community had one unbreakable rule. Reputation means nothing unless you back it up on the mat. One day, at a private martial arts charity event in Los Angeles, a gathering attended by icons, world champions, stunt coordinators, and instructors from multiple disciplines, Seagal arrived unexpectedly. His presence created immediate ripples. People whispered. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Robert Wall was there too. Not as a challenger. Not as a critic. Just as a respected elder who supported the event every year. But that day, fate had other plans. The event host, excited by the presence of so many big names, suggested a light demonstration. Something respectful, symbolic, and controlled. A kata here, a joint lock there. Maybe even a friendly grappling exchange between experts. Not a fight, just a show of harmony between different styles. Seagal agreed instantly. But then he said something that froze the room. I'll demonstrate with anyone here, except Robert Wall. The air tightened. Wall blinked calmly, unsure whether to take it as an insult or a compliment. The crowd murmured. Some felt Seagal was avoiding him. Others thought he was being cautious. But Wall simply smiled and walked toward Seagal with an open hand. Steven, we don't need to demonstrate together, but we can at least show unity. Seagal didn't take his hand. Instead, He gestured toward a muscular Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor nearby and said, "Aikido handles grapplers easily." The instructor, humble, respectful, shook his head. "Sensei Seagal, Aikido is beautiful, but every art has strengths. I am not here to embarrass anyone." Seagal replied coldly, "You won't." That was the moment the audience realized the temperature of the room had changed. To avoid conflict, the host stepped in and suggested a neutral, gentle, controlled demonstration. No submissions, no slams, just movement and flow. Seagal agreed. The instructor agreed. Wall stepped back, watching. The demonstration began. At first, it looked smooth. Seagal moved with his trademark fluidity. The jiu-jitsu instructor cooperated respectfully. The crowd watched attentively. But then, almost as if trying to reclaim authority, Seagal applied a shoulder lock far harder than necessary. The instructor winced, but stayed calm. The crowd tensed. Then it happened again, another lock, harder. Then again, twisting, forcing compliance. This time, the instructor grimaced, losing balance, nearly falling. Robert Wall took a step forward. A few others did too. The room sensed something was wrong. Seagal's expression didn't change, but his ego was doing the talking now. And the instructor, tired of being overpowered in a friendly demo, finally reacted. In one swift motion, he lowered his center of gravity, shifted his hips, and slipped out of Seagal's grip with pure technique. The crowd gasped. Seagal stumbled half a step. Everything froze. The instructor backed up respectfully. "Sir, this is just a demonstration. I don't want to hurt you." But the damage was already done. Seagal's mystique, his aura of invulnerability, had cracked in front of witnesses who understood what they were seeing. And the room turned to Robert Wall. Quietly, naturally, almost instinctively. Because Wall represented the old guard. The ones who believed skill was proven through mutual respect, not domination. Wall stepped forward, not to challenge Seagal, but to save the moment. "Steven," Wall said softly, "we're here to inspire, not to intimidate." Something in that line struck deep. Seagal stiffened, jaw tightening. Not because Wall insulted him, but because Wall exposed something Seagal struggled with. Fear of being tested. Wall continued calmly. "Let's show unity. Your Aikido is unique. His jiu-jitsu is effective. My karate is different. Every art brings something to the table." The audience nodded. This was the message they needed. But Seagal whispered, barely audible, "I don't need unity. I need respect." Wall nodded slowly. "Respect is earned through humility." The room went silent. Seagal walked off the mat without another word. And right there, without a single punch thrown, without a single challenge issued, the truth became undeniable. In the world of real martial artists, humility echoes louder than claims. Later, backstage, several fighters approached Wall. "Thank you for stepping in. You handled that perfectly. That could have gotten ugly." Wall simply shook his head. "Steven isn't a bad man. He's just lost in his own legend." And that sentiment spread far beyond the room. For the first time, people began to recognize the difference between the Steven Seagal they saw on screen and the one struggling to maintain control behind the scenes. News travels fast in the martial arts world, but in the age of smartphones, it travels at light speed. Within hours of the charity event ending, whispers turned into conversations, conversations turned into posts, and posts exploded into full-blown online debates. People weren't arguing about who could beat whom. They weren't comparing styles or techniques. They were talking about character. The clip that went viral wasn't Seagal stumbling. It wasn't the tense exchange on the mat. It wasn't even the jiu-jitsu instructor defending himself. It was Robert Wall stepping in, calm, composed, dignified, reminding everyone what martial arts was truly about. A single quote became the center of thousands of shares. Right arrow, respect is earned through humility. Robert Wall. It hit people hard, because everyone knew it was the truth. The video gained traction across martial arts forums, YouTube commentary channels, TikTok edits, and Facebook groups. Millions debated the situation. Some defended Seagal. Others called out his behavior. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. Robert Wall embodied the spirit of a real martial artist. Meanwhile, Seagal stayed quiet. No statements. No interviews. No comments. Perhaps he knew anything he said would pour gasoline on a wildfire. Or maybe he didn't know how to respond when image and reality finally collided. Robert Wall, on the other hand, didn't have to say anything at all. He didn't seek attention. He didn't comment publicly. He simply continued teaching, training, and inspiring because he wasn't built for drama. He was built for discipline. And that made the world admire him even more. The turning point. A week later, a major martial arts podcast invited Robert Wall for an interview. Wall rarely accepted invitations, but this time he agreed. Not to talk about the incident, but to address a deeper issue. When the host asked, "What did you think about what happened with Steven?" the entire live stream held its breath. Wall smiled gently and said, "Every martial artist walks two paths, the path of ego and the path of humility. One makes you feared, the other makes you respected." The host leaned in. "And which path should we follow?" Wall answered without hesitation, "Humility. Always humility. Because ego disappears the moment you meet someone better. But humility stays with you forever." Viewers flooded the chat with messages, gratitude, respect, inspiration. It wasn't Wall's skill that impressed them. It was his wisdom. The interview became one of the most shared martial arts discussions of the year. Martial arts schools began playing the clip for new students. Even MMA fighters reposted it, praising the message. And slowly, beautifully, the focus shifted away from Seagal entirely. The real story became the legacy Robert Wall represented. What happened after the viral wave? Behind the scenes, several stunt professionals and martial artists reported that attitudes in the industry started changing. Actors became more cautious about claiming unrealistic abilities. Directors pushed for more collaboration and safety on set. Young martial artists started asking their instructors about humility and respect instead of invincibility. One instructor said, "This is the first time my students wanted to talk about honor instead of danger." And in a quiet dojo one evening, Robert Wall was asked by a young beginner, "Sensei Wall, how do you stay humble when you're so good?" Wall chuckled, "By remembering that someone out there is always better. And that martial arts is not about proving yourself to others. It's about improving yourself for yourself." The student nodded, absorbing the lesson. Wall placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That's the path. Walk it with pride." The final message. As the buzz faded, one truth remained crystal clear. Steven Seagal had built his image on invincibility, but Robert Wall built his legacy on integrity. And in the end, integrity won. The world didn't remember Wall because he was stronger, faster, or more dangerous. They remembered him because he represented what martial arts was meant to be: discipline, respect, calmness under pressure, and the courage to stand for the right values even when the world is watching. And that is why the story lived on, not as a tale of conflict, but as a lesson in character.